Right now on Brookland News Live, we will take you inside a hearing for Tyler Robinson, who is the accused killer of Charlie Kirk, live in Provo, Utah, coming up in just moments. It's rare that a hearing happens while we're on the air, so we will take you there. Also, a developing story out of Washington, D.C. You are taking a live look right now at the Donald J. Trump and the JFK Memorial Center for the Performing Arts to see the sign there, but a judge says it's actually illegal to have a current president's name there. We're going to break down that ruling coming up for you here in just a few moments, and we will of course bring you the latest developments on the war in Iran coming out of the White House, all coming up today on this edition of Brookland News Live, and it all starts right now.
It's time for all the news you need and more. Brookland News Live starts right now.
And we are live. Thank you for joining us. It is 2:03 here in Brooklyn, meaning it is 12:03 on the West Coast and 3:03 on the East Coast. It is good to be with you as always. There is so much news to get to on this Friday. It seems that this week, I feel like last week we were having kind of slower times. It was less news going on. This week is the total opposite of that, especially later in the week now that we've got this news on the war in Iran. But I'm Jackson Mitchell. It is Friday, June 12th, 2026 here. Again, good to be with you. Okay, for a large part of the hour, what we're going to do for you, and this hearing could wrap up soon at any moment. We don't quite know how long the judge is going to let this hearing go. This, again, is a live look right now in Provo, Utah. It is a hearing, an evidentiary hearing on evidence, essentially a hearing on evidence about, in the case, excuse me, let me get this all out here, some context here. This is the case for Tyler Robinson. He's accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. You remember, we all likely remember that moment when all of that happened. And then there was in this case now, there have been motions trying to get the media outside of the courtroom. The judge said, no, the media can be in the courtroom. Now the defense is alleging that the prosecution broke a gag order that said, well, you can't talk to the media because someone in the prosecution's team spoke to the media. That is the allegation made there, and that is what this argument is on today. And it is whether evidence from an interview that was conducted not in front of the defense can be brought up in the court here. So let's begin listening. It's been going on for quite some time since this morning, so we're going to listen in once again. Again, that's what I'm saying. It could wrap up at any moment because it already has been going on for quite some time. Let's begin listening. And
but defendant's attempt to do that violates the rules of constitutional construction, legal interpretation, because it would create contradictory constitutional provisions. What defendant is trying to say is, even though the Sixth Amendment right to confrontation, which we know would provide the right to cross-examination and therefore prevent the state from relying on hearsay, even though that right doesn't apply at the preliminary hearing, there is some other constitutional right that could somehow indirectly provide that right. But then we would have two conflicting constitutional provisions. And that's not how we read the Constitution. That's not how we read statutes. We read them to be in harmony with each other, different provisions to be in harmony with each other, and to not render a different provision superfluous. If you could provide the right to confrontation through the Sixth Amendment right to counsel or 14th Amendment right to due process, then what work is the Sixth Amendment right to confrontation doing? It just doesn't make sense to do that. So that's exactly why the Ninth Circuit in Peterson versus California said it's illogical to conclude that the substitute for a grand jury indictment, which is the state preliminary hearing procedure, must contain greater protections than the grand jury provides for itself in the federal system. So if the federal system, the equivalent to the state preliminary hearing is a grand jury proceeding. The grand jury proceeding allows the federal system to determine probable cause to require a defendant to stand trial The defendant doesn't have a right to be present in those proceedings, doesn't have a right to representation, doesn't have a right to cross-examination, or even to present exculpatory evidence. If that type of a procedure is constitutional, then Utah's preliminary hearing procedure is certainly constitutional. I could go through each of the different constitutional provisions that defendant has relied on. I'll do that very briefly, just summarize the reasons why we don't believe those apply. The Sixth Amendment, even assuming the defendant could rely on some other provision, which we don't believe he can, but the Sixth Amendment right to counsel, it doesn't create additional rights. What it does is it evaluates counsel's performance under the circumstances as they existed at the time. Now, defendant brought up the fact that there is a right to confront witnesses at suppression hearings and at sentencing hearings and at parole revocation hearings. That's a procedural right to cross-examination. It's not a Sixth Amendment right to confrontation. We know from Crawford versus Washington, the Sixth Amendment right means that the state cannot rely on hearsay evidence that a defendant has not had a prior opportunity to cross-examine. And so it's the Sixth Amendment right that prevents the state from relying on hearsay. That's completely different from saying the defendant has the right to be able to cross-examine any witnesses that the state calls. And in fact, at a preliminary hearing, the defendant will have the right to cross-examine. I think we're planning on calling 4 witnesses. Defendant will have a right to cross-examine those witnesses. But a procedural right to cross-examination doesn't mean that the Sixth Amendment right, as interpreted in Crawford, applies and precludes the reliance on hearsay. With respect to due process and the 14th Amendment, again, you have to look at what process is due under the circumstances. And here, again, we've got a very low standard. And the state's process here gives the defendant far more protections than the federal grand jury proceeding does. Both of them determine probable cause as to whether the defendant can go to trial. And so due process doesn't supply some sort of right to confrontation that the Sixth Amendment right doesn't supply. The equal protection argument is interesting because defendant has not shown that he's similarly situated. Well, let me back up. What defendant relies on is Morrissey versus Brewer, which is the case that says defendants have a right to confront and cross-examine witnesses at a parole revocation hearing. But that's a defendant who has been convicted at trial and who is facing reimposition of a criminal sentence to serve out the remainder of his sentence. Defendant here isn't similarly situated to that type of a defendant. So he can't make an equal protection challenge based on that situation. And again, Morrissey versus Brewer does not say that the Sixth Amendment right to confrontation applies. It merely says as a matter of due process, if the state is calling the witness, the defendant has the right to cross-examine them at the proceeding, just like defendant does at this preliminary hearing. As far as the Eighth Amendment goes, the state doesn't have any qualms with the idea that the Eighth Amendment, if we get to the point of whether or not the death penalty is an appropriate penalty here, certainly the Eighth Amendment heightened protections apply there. But we're not at that point, and defendant hasn't cited any case that would extend those Eighth Amendment protections beyond the decision to impose the death penalty, or they do cite Beck versus Alabama, which talks about instructing the jury at the guilt phase. We're not at that point. You can't use the Eighth Amendment and say, well, because this is a death case, there's super due process or there's additional rules that apply above and beyond the procedural and evidentiary rules that apply at every other stage of this proceeding. And then finally, as to separation of powers, I don't see anywhere in the federal Constitution that dictates any particular separation of powers principles to the states. And so it's completely up to the state of Utah to determine how it wants to divide the powers between its various branches of government. And the constitutional provision that's at issue here clearly says that that reliable hearsay can be defined as by statute or by rule. So the Constitution itself is giving the legislature and the courts the ability to define what constitutes reliable hearsay. As far as Your Honor's question about what you would like, what the state would like you to review as far as the exhibits go, we just renew our request that the court review all of the exhibits in preparation for the preliminary hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Burt.
Already, I believe
Court,
they're
I've circled the
That feed is
exhibits
back.
we're
I
asking the
apologize.
court to review. They are exhibits 11, 16, 30, 31, 32, 33, and 34. I have a copy for the court with those highlighted if the court
Thank you,
would like
Mr.
it.
Burt. Yes, and if
May
you'd
I
like to
approach?
approach, you may. I appreciate it. All right. Thank you to both parties.
And Judge, could I just briefly respond
Oh,
to
of course.
the arguments that were made by the state? Just quickly to run through them. The state emphasizes there's a low burden at the prelim. Granted, it's a low burden, but as the State versus Virgin, VIRGIN case said, low burden does not mean no burden. And the U.S. Supreme Court in Coleman versus Alabama recognized that the burden of proof at the prelim is very low. They nevertheless held that the defendant has a Sixth Amendment right to the effective assistance of counsel. So the fact that it's a low burden does not govern whether procedural rights should be applied. And the Coleman case holds exactly that. The state says that the degree of reliability depends on the nature of the proceedings. That's true. But this is a case where the state of Utah has provided procedural rights at the preliminary hearing, unlike grand jury proceedings. There are rights granted by statute to counsel. There's constitutional right to counsel. There is a right by statute to call defense witnesses, to subpoena witnesses. So the court has to take those procedural indicia into account in determining what other rights might be applicable. And both the U.S. Supreme Court and the Utah Supreme Court has said that the preliminary hearing is a critical stage of the proceedings. The state says that, citing this Ninth Circuit brief opinion, the Peterson case, that it's illogical that the preliminary hearing must have greater protection than grand jury proceedings. It might be illogical, but the reality is that defendants are accorded greater rights in preliminary hearings than in grand jury proceedings. There is no right to counsel at grand jury proceedings. There is no right to subpoena defense witnesses at a grand jury proceeding. And yet in Utah, as elsewhere, defendants do enjoy those rights to certain protections. And once having defined that it's an adversary critical proceeding, the state has an obligation to provide the tools necessary to make that confrontation meaningful. State emphasizes that the defense has a right to call witnesses. Theoretically true, but irrelevant in this case because, as the court will see from reviewing the exhibits, how the state proposes to make its case in this case is exclusively through the use of hearsay. So calling a record custodian or a police officer who has no knowledge about the essential elements of the offense, the defense could cross-examine that person on some chain of custody issues, but it's got nothing to do with the critical issues before the court, which are the essential elements shown by probable cause. And in this case, those elements are going to be satisfied by hearsay alone. The defense says that or the state says that there's no equal protection problem here because we're not similarly situated to probation or parole violators. In all three of those cases, the interest at stake is whether the defendant should be confined for prolonged periods of time pending the outcome of his hearing. So a parole revocation hearing, especially the preliminary parole revocation hearing, is very, and in fact, it's indistinguishable from a preliminary hearing. The goal is the same, to determine whether there's cause to hold the person, deprive that person of liberty pending further proceedings. So there is an equal protection violation here. The state says that the court can only look to the Sixth Amendment. As I understand the argument, the court cannot look to procedural due process as guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. It cannot look to equal protection. It cannot look to the Eighth Amendment. It cannot look to any other doctrines beside the Sixth Amendment to determine confrontation. And we've pointed to the court a long line of cases in both the U.S. Supreme Court and the Utah Supreme Court, which refute that contention. It's clear the court has an obligation to look at whatever constitutional provisions are implicated by the procedure in question. And the Utah Supreme Court, when it was looking at the subpoena powers case, looked at whether the act violated confrontation rights, equal protection, separation of powers. No one ever suggested that the court had no power to look at various constitutional theories. That theory is not supported by the case law. And then lastly, the state says that we've cited no cases to the court saying that the Eighth Amendment applies to the preliminary hearing procedure of this case. And that's simply not true. Gregg versus Georgia said that every procedural protection must be observed in a capital case, not at a capital trial, in a capital case. And as charged right now, this is a capital case. And we've also cited to the court the Ford case, Ford versus Wainwright, also along the same lines, saying that in capital proceedings, there's a heightened need for reliability. And then lastly, in our reply, we cited a whole string of state court cases which hold that at the preliminary hearing, not the trial, the preliminary hearing, the court has an obligation to employ a heightened standard of reliability. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you to the parties. We're turning to the last item, and just cutting to the chase, does the state oppose defendant's request on docket 593?
Can I have just a moment?
And there is also the scheduling of the responses to an EMC request, which we discussed.
Okay, well,
We
thank
need
you
to
for
deal with that
reminding
as
me of
well.
that. Thank you, Mr. Novak.
Alrighty, you are continuing to listen in live for about the last 19 minutes or so to a key evidence hearing in the case where Tyler Robinson is accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. That is live there in Provo, Utah, where we are continuing to monitor the news there. So we will bring you updates as we get them. Alrighty, I want to take it to another story that is happening right now. This is a live look right now out of Washington, D.C., where you are taking a look right now at the what was once the Donald J. Trump and the JFK Memorial Center there. Now that Donald J. Trump Park going to be removed. You see construction workers there in Washington, D.C. A judge also ruling today and that they would deny a request from the Kennedy Center to pause this ruling, ordering President Donald Trump's name removed from the building. Now, unless the Kennedy Center decides to appeal this decision from U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper, the decision raises the prospect that Trump's name will be removed from the building. Now, in his ruling last month, Cooper said only Congress could institute a change to the Kennedy Center's name and ordered that references to Trump be removed by Friday. It is Friday, 3:21 there in Washington. You see construction workers look like they might be building something where they're able to climb up on top to get to the name part. Looks like maybe that's what they're working on right now, but that again, that is a live look in Washington D.C. as that sign is removed there. So all the way zoomed out now as we continue to monitor this live shot. We're going to bring you more from it. Just wanted to bring you that story that a judge again had denied that request to keep Donald Trump's name on the Kennedy Center. So again, that was a ruling by U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper earlier today. And again, as we noted a few moments ago, unless the Kennedy Center decides they want to appeal this decision, it will remain the same. Okay, we want to take you right back live into the courtroom in Provo, Utah. Another story that is happening right now. And continue listening in there again. This is live in Provo, Utah.
Thank you.
The hearing happening there. Let's turn the audio up and continue listening
I
in.
realize that this appeared on the horizon.
We can have till Tuesday close of business.
All right, so we're looking at Tuesday, the 16th of June.
Yes.
All right, close of business. Mr. Novak, with that information.
I think Thursday, the 18th.
All right. I close of business as well.
And actually, in some ways, this may or may not sync. Anyway, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, and I know where you're going. Does that sync pretty closely with the last remaining issue, briefing on the potential? Well, the problem with that is until it's filed, the request for an EMC, that starts the time. My lawyer math doesn't get me to how close we are to the prelim off the fly, but that's the trigger point.
I was an economist before I was a lawyer, so
All right,
my
then
math
I'll allow
might
you.
help. So you just want to hold that there for a second and move on to the other one and then see if they're in sync, or what did you want to?
Well, and I'm fine. It sounds like we have a good understanding for the briefing on that particular docket 593. So that's been resolved. Turning to the last issue is in regards to the EMC. When would the 14 days?
So right now, the court's order from May says that media requests need to be filed 14 days before the proceeding. 14 days before the proceeding, which is on July 6th, is June 22nd. Which
So
would
a week
not-
from Monday.
Pardon?
A week from this coming Monday.
So this is what I was going to propose, and we did meet and confer about this. And my understanding of the state's position is they don't want the court to change its order. Okay, so I understand that's their position, but here's our proposal. We propose that for purposes of the preliminary hearing of July 6th, if it proceeds on that date, that the court adopt the following schedule. Any request.
Okay, so it looks like the
For
hearing may have
electronic media.
included. Of course, today is the day we're not expected to get a ruling out of this case. It might come days later that we will get a ruling. As we brought to you at the top of the hour, this case has centered on, or today's hearing rather, has centered on if the prosecution violated a gag order by Judge Tony Graff there, who put that in place, saying, well, you can't speak to the media here. The trial expected to happen a little after the summer. We will be monitoring that. You see Tyler Robinson there. If you look on the far right side of your screen, you'll see him. He is in what appears maybe a white or blue button up. I can't quite tell from the camera view there, but he is sitting, appearing to listen intently into the hearing. Again, Tyler Robinson is the suspect accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. Again, this is live at Provo, Utah. What we're going to do here, if you're watching, is sneak in a quick commercial break. When we come back, we've got more of those big stories making headlines, and we've also are getting in some breaking news out of Midland, Texas that is coming into us right now. That is when we come back. You're watching Brookland News Live. Alrighty, welcome back into Brooklyn News Live. I'm sorry for that extended break. We're preparing for our next story. Officials in Midland, Texas, gave an update earlier this morning on a shooting that occurred there in Midland, Texas. It left 10 injured, and the suspect was also killed in all of this. It is now understanding we might be getting another update from Midland, Texas, a live update. We are working to get that in for you if we do have that update. I know authorities gave an update earlier this morning on that, and that is what we were going to bring you here. So excuse me. Again, it was a shooting that occurred in Midland, Texas. 10 injured, the suspect killed. What we also know is that that suspect is now been identified as Victor Mata Villarreal. Now, he launched a manhunt last night throughout Midland, Texas. He is accused of firing a rifle at an officer during a late-night traffic stop Wednesday before fleeing the scene. So this was something that we had seen before. This was a suspect that was already being hunted for. So we want to play you right now a press conference from the mayor of Midland, Texas, Lori Blanc, who delivered an update this morning after the shooting had occurred. This is before some of the key details were released, but we do still want to listen into it. Take a listen.
We're in strong communication with all of those teams and just want to share some details with you. So I'm going to be referencing my notes so that I don't miss anything. The first thing is, yes, we did have an active shooter, and we already have a perimeter established. The situation is now secured in that area, but we're still asking that all Midlanders stay put. If you're in that area, you don't need to be out and driving around or going to try to see anything. Officers are containing the situation, and we ask that you respect that perimeter. All entities responded on scene, and we have a lot of the partner agencies from the county, from other surrounding communities, and we're really thankful for the response that they've also made. And we also want to let you know that we do have 11 known victims at this time. There's at least one victim that is dead on the scene. We don't have any other details to disclose at this time, but that's the situation as of right now. This is, of course, an ongoing situation, and we don't want to confirm anything or give any other particular details before we have a thorough investigation. And so our goal here is to reassure you that we do have strong response from our local Midland Police Department as well as our region, and that we're going to be continuing to give you updates as we have confirmed details. We want you to know that Facebook has had a national outage today. Many of you may be aware of that, and we know that a lot of Midlanders do get their news from Facebook. And so if you would like the most up-to-date information, we've had success in getting Twitter to transmit that quickly. And so you can reference the City of Midland communication pages on Twitter if you're having trouble with Facebook or Instagram. We're going to continue to try to post on all outlets as much as possible. The blood bank need is not immediate. We've had a conversation as recently as right before this press conference. The blood bank need is not immediate, but we know that there may be future needs. And so if you have a willingness to go to our local blood banks to give blood, we invite you to do that. We would also say that the food and donations, many of our Midland community are going to want to reach out and make donations for our first responders and for the families of these victims. We ask that you do those things through the United Way so that we have one specific location that's disseminating those things and making sure that the needs are addressed. They're collaborating with our local food bank, with other different groups to make sure that all of those needs are covered. So please direct yourself to United Way. We want to also comment that there is a family reunification center that is set up at Midland Memorial Hospital at this time. And so if you have questions about one of your loved ones and you want to confirm anything, we would direct you there. I'm going to share a phone number, and then we'll also be putting that out on our socials. But that phone number for the Family Reunification Center is 43.
All right, I'm going to turn the audio down here because I do want to note that phone number was released, but then later retracted because officials at the hospital said in order to get to the reunification center, you would need to go inside instead of just calling.
Where you could go and get more information. If you'd like to go to the hospital in person, we would direct you to the chapel at the hospital to be able to get more information. You can talk to that family reunification center there at the chapel at the hospital. I want to make sure that you understand that this is all hands on deck. All of our community responders are participating in addressing the situation right now, and we're committed to staying in that shape until we have everything addressed and fully wrapped up. So I believe Mayor Pro Tem Stretcher Burks would like to make a comment as well. You know, step forward.
Can we give the mic that I go up there?
I'll just stand close by and you can.
Thank you, Mayor. Amy Stretcher Burks, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to say our thoughts and prayers are with the victims, their families, and everyone impacted by this tragic incident. We're also praying for law enforcement officers, first responders, and the surgical teams working tirelessly to protect lives and provide care during this difficult time. Please pray for Midland. Most importantly, please pray for those impacted. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. And so we want to close. We will take a few questions from the media.
Alrighty, please pray for Midland. Of course, there have been updates since this press conference that was held earlier this morning. The major updates being that suspect earlier this morning, we knew that there was one dead. It was 10 injured, one dead. It would later be confirmed that suspect was the one dead in this scene. Again, this all occurring at about 8 a.m. this morning in Midland, Texas, at an active shooter event. It was a suspect that had already had a manhunt after him, people searching for him for firing at an officer during a Wednesday night traffic stop. Okay, we're going to bring the latest there from Midland, Texas if we get more updates throughout the hour that we are here with you. We do have some more news happening right now over on Wall Street. SpaceX making its debut there, and Elon Musk almost instantly becoming the first ever trillionaire on the nation. SpaceX today launching the largest IPO ever, trading under the ticket SPCX. The stock opened at $150 and quickly soared well past its $135 IPO price, pushing the company's valuation over $2 trillion and making Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire. So Musk holds about 42% of the company's equity, giving him over 80% voting control. His SpaceX and Tesla stakes propelled his net worth over $1 trillion. Now, the historic public offering is structured to raise capital to fund massive growth phases, including the expansion of the Starlink internet constellation, the integration of Musk's AI company xAI, and data center developments there. So you already see up 20%. I'll tell you, for a debut stock market, that is pretty good. Alrighty, you are watching Brookland News Live on this Friday. We're going to seek another commercial break. When we come back, more of those top stories making headlines. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back into Brooklyn News Live, a live look in Los Angeles, California there from that sky view, courtesy to KTTV, the local Fox affiliate there. As the FIFA World Cup is set to begin today in Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium. This is the first game being held in the U.S. Of course, we talked to you yesterday about the FIFA World Cup as it was beginning in Mexico City against the team out of Johannesburg, South Africa. And now you see Stu Mundell there, the KTTV helicopter guy. Why don't we take a moment and listen into what he has to say here?
To see what kind of good loser I am, but I'm all about trivia. Let's do it. Let me get my phone. France.
Okay. The thing about it is this is just a feed of Stu Mundell, so we are unable to get the feed that has the questions that he is being asked from the studio. So we'll go back to when he changes that camera back there. Again, that is a courtesy to KTTV. Stu Mundell there in that helicopter, showing us a look at the FIFA World Cup expected to begin today at SoFi Stadium. It is just one of the 8 matches expected to be held at SoFi Stadium. Today is the USA versus Paraguay, and then we have Iran versus New Zealand. That is coming on June 16th. Then by the June 18th, Switzerland versus Bosnia and Herzegovina. I believe I'm probably butchering some of these countries' names there. And then we have Belgium versus Iran on June 21st, and then Turkey versus the USA on June 25th. Now, the knockout stages all begin in late June and the beginning of July. June 28th, and excuse me, I'm going to be reading off of the screen here. I want to get this all correct. Round of 32, that's on June 28th, excuse me. Then on July 2nd, round of 32 again. By July 10th is the quarterfinal. So the quarterfinal is expected to be held in Los Angeles, California. They're also being held across Dallas. I know there's going to be some at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is in Atlanta. All just something big to look forward to. I will tell you, I was told tickets begin at $3,000. I told you guys a little bit about that yesterday. Might just want to watch on TV. I believe a lot of the games are going to be on Fox. I do also know that the first 2 games of the World Cups will be streamed free on Tubi. So if you don't have access to watch Fox, then you can stream them free on Tubi. That is an app, wherever you get your apps. Not to give no free promotion, but you get where I'm going here. If you want to watch them free, you can always go there. Okay, we are going to. Here's what we're going to do. Take you back to our live feed there in Washington, D.C. as we take a look at the number of stories happening right now across the nation. We brought you this story a little earlier in the hour. We're still monitoring that feed. It appears maybe they're about to begin taking down the letters. We're literally waiting for the moment that they begin doing that, and we'll take you there live. And then we've also got this developing story out of SpaceX, where we are currently watching. Okay, it looks like they might be taking a letter out. Hold up, we're going to go back to this feed. Oh no, they're still building that little stand. I thought maybe they were going to use that pole there to take out a letter. Okay, besides the point. We're also following this breaking news, developing story, whatever you want to call it. SpaceX up 17% on its opening day on Wall Street. So we are watching that, and we'll bring you more of that here in just a few moments. Again, we are continuing to monitor the feed we brought you just a few moments ago as excitement continues to grow across Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium. You're watching their Stu Mundell. Maybe the camera will flip here in just a few moments and we'll get to see the outside like we were a few moments ago. Congress now in a recess, at least the House is, for a week after not being able to pass, well, a key spy bill. We brought that breaking news to you yesterday. This comes ahead of the FIFA World Cup. A lot of people bringing that into play here, saying maybe there is a little bit of concern that they are unable to use FISA ahead of the FIFA World Cup. And then, of course, the latest on the war in Iran. I believe we're actually might be having some issues with our live stream feed from the White House. That comes, of course, we continue to follow the latest on the war in Iran. And I believe we are having some live stream feeds. Maybe we'll get that feedback sometime soon. Okay, we're going to seek another commercial break. You're watching Brooklyn News Live. More headlines on the other side. And welcome back here live in Brooklyn News Live. I want to take you to this live feed right now. This is out of Washington, D.C., the United States Commission on Civil Rights meeting on juvenile mental health facilities in juvenile detention facilities, essentially. So they're going to be talking a lot about mental health with juveniles, so that might be disturbing to some of our viewers. But again, this is a focus on mental health care inside juvenile facilities, detention facilities. So essentially, juvie is what they call it there. So we're going to listen in to this hearing for the remainder of the hour.
And I began to think that the system failed me, but then I realized that it is doing exactly what it was designed to do: kill, steal, and destroy. And thank you for your time, but I just wanted to leave you with this. We need to meet kids and parents where they are and not leave them there. So if we don't treat issues like the criminalization of poverty, substance abuse, lack of access to mental health resources at the source, we will never fix this problem, and we will continue to fail the future leaders that we know right now as children. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I think we can transition to the folks that we have on the call. If we have anybody available.
Bill, go ahead and unmute.
Just did.
We can hear you. Go ahead. State your name.
All right. My name is William Bush. I'm a professor of history at Texas A&M University, San Antonio. In my speaking today, I'm speaking only for myself and not for the university. I contributed to the Texas report that this commission published about 2 years ago. I'm a historian and I'm an author. I've written widely about the history of juvenile justice in Texas as well as other places. This is an issue that I've been focused on for about 20 years. And with respect to Judge Garza, I hate to tell him, but the problems that this committee is investigating go back much further than the 1980s. I wish it were different. But the historic ongoing nature of the abusive conditions of confinement in juvenile institutions, the lack of educational and mental health services, the negative outcomes for youth who are incarcerated in these places goes back over 100 years. And in the limited time that I have, I just want to harp on two things really that I hope the commission will consider. And I guess I should apologize if others spoke about this earlier today. The first is investing in community-based versus prison solutions to youth offending. This is something that's been a struggle really for much of the juvenile justice system's existence. In the report I wrote for the Texas report, I noted that the state of Texas was advised as far back as the 1940s to deinstitutionalize its system and to set up community-based programming. And I would just say, as Mr. Shirabi commented earlier, the money from those institutions when they are shut down really needs to follow the kids and the services back into the communities to have any kind of a long-lasting effect. And that segues into my second point, which is that the history of juvenile justice is replete with cycles of reform and retrenchment. So there have been moments in the history of juvenile justice where humanitarian reforms have taken place that have signaled progress in the treatment of youth in the juvenile justice system. And then usually a moral panic over violent juvenile crime will lead to a pendulum swing back towards retribution and the building of more prisons. And as I like to say, if all you have is a hammer, then every problem is a nail. And I can't think of a better analogy for juvenile justice. We don't need to keep building prisons for youth. And I would just ask the commission to really think about what types of policy reforms will survive these kinds of cycles and create the true lasting change that I think everybody in the room would like to see. Thanks very much for your time.
I appreciate it. If the next speaker can come off of mute, if we have an additional speaker.
We have one more speaker. Please push *6 to unmute now. I believe that's Michael Taylor. *6 to unmute. We can hear you now. Go ahead and state your name.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, my name is Michelle Taylor. That's why I was like, hold on, wait, are you saying my name? My apologies about that, though. So, yes, I am with the Juvenile Justice Coalition of Ohio, and I am speaking on behalf of just interactions with youth and other experiences that I've encountered along my path working with youth that have lived experience incarcerated. And one of the main reoccurring themes that continues to come up are those adverse childhood experiences, many of which youth don't understand or have the capacity to make some of those decisions, because we understand that their amygdala and their prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus are all firing at rates that they're not able to fully grasp at the age, at a young age. So with those adverse childhood experiences and just the environments that they
Alrighty, I know we literally just began listening, and I hate to just interrupt on live feeds, but due to the historic day that SpaceX is having in the stock market after beginning trading today, there is a woman speaking here. We're going to begin listening in here that has to do with SpaceX and their trading. Let's listen in.
Public markets here at NASDAQ, and the world's capital has the opportunity to invest in it. We are so proud to be SpaceX's partner as you continue to reach for the stars. And now it is my distinct honor to introduce SpaceX's Chief Financial Officer, Brett Johnson, for his closing bell remarks.
Thank you very much. Wow, what an exciting day. You know, I just want to remind you, this is just one more step in a journey that we're just getting started on. You know, you mentioned some of the infrastructure of the future, and that's really what we're bringing to the world, whether it's in space, whether it's in connectivity, or whether it's in AI. And it's really cool to be out talking about a product that I think is going to be so impactful for humanity. And I agree with the comment, nothing better than now having the ability for everybody to be a part of the SpaceX journey related to stock ownership. And so certainly we really, really appreciate all of our stakeholders. I have to start with the employees, of course, right? We wouldn't be here without world-class employees at every level. So thank you. And all of our partners from the customer side, the vendor side, and of course, our shareholders. So I really appreciate it. I do think we're just getting started on our journey. And with that, thank you very much, NASDAQ.
Alrighty, there we go. Some comments made there after SpaceX's record day over on Wall Street. Okay, we want to turn to your forecast here and give us just a few seconds here. This is loading up for you. Right now in Brookland. Tonight, scattered thunderstorms are going to continue. Low of 70 degrees. That is the same story all this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. It is going to be hot and rainy. I don't know if you were woken up early this morning by that loud thunder that was booming throughout Brooklyn. Saturday, high of 92, low of 72. Scattered thunderstorms continue all the way into Sunday. And then on Sunday, we're going to see a high of 84 and a low of 64. Remember, you can always join us every weekday on Brooklyn News Live. We're here, ready to bring you those big headlines. Join us on Monday, 2 p.m. We'll have all of the big headlines that you need and so much more. Ahead of next week, I believe we will not be here on Thursday. Let me check here my calendar and make sure I'm correct. We will not be here on Thursday, yeah. So we'll be here every other day. So you can join us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of your night. We appreciate you and stay safe.